Oh, good evening and welcome back to the Oasis Podcast. I'm John Mark and this is Wayne Weaver, and we are here to talk about business nuggets and Independence Day. Wayne, we're 248 years from the Declaration of Independence. What are your thoughts about where we are as a country since then?
Actually, let me ask you the question. Do you know where the Declaration of Independence was signed?
Do you know what? I always thought it was in Philadelphia.
At the bottom of the paper.
Oh, you're great. Awesome. John Hancock found that pretty quick, didn't he?
Yeah.
From the bottom of the paper. Wow. Okay.
I found that out when I was pretty young yet.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, if I would have thought a little bit harder, that's where I saw all the signatures. So,
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. So, but yeah, where do you think we are?
Wow.
I mean, this is interesting. It seems like we're at a spot where people are debating who we are as a nation and all of that. And that really plays into what we want to talk about tonight a little later about business. But, you know, we're celebrating kind of a big day for the United States of America. And regardless of what you believe about the founding of America, was it Christian, was it not, we have definitely experienced a great freedom of religion and expression over the years. And at times the nation has been called a shining city on a hill and stuff in the world. But what are your thoughts? As you reflect, a pastor, a business leader, all of these things.
Well, you know, I'm 68 years old, and ever since I recall, you know, basically events, national events, international events, which would have been probably the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. I was very young yet then, but I understood, you know, situations that were going on. And at least to a part, what was reported, didn't really follow it, just as an innocent boy. However, it put some marks on me that, you know, this is really something, how people are fighting to kill each other and to win and to take sides and basically to take over countries and, you know, take disagreements to its furthest extent and revenge and all that. And, you know, from that point on up till today, we've just gone through numerous of those types of things. But for some reason, there has never been a war really fought from other countries, foreign countries in America. That is really kind of something. Mm-hmm. And it speaks about the strength of America and who we are. But there is something that I've said many years ago, that a country is never stronger than its borders. It can't be. Well, we know we have no more borders. We really don't, especially as the southern borders. People can just walk across.
Right.
So what we're having now is a delusion, I believe, of many countries coming into this country. And what it'll do eventually is it's going to bring ruin. It will. I mean, the culture, I know that there's talk, you know, as basically, America is a cross-culture, every culture country, but it was still founded on some very solid principles of that had to do with Christianity, definitely some biblical principles out of freedoms, the different freedoms that we have. And as those continue to erode, in which we see it, and what we'll have is we as citizens in America that were born and raised here, we do have an appreciation for, because we saw history, we know what has happened and transpired. But a lot of these that are just flushing into America now have no idea what history this is, and they don't even consider it precious. 4th of July, Independence Day, I don't think is a big deal to a lot of those people, or a lot of people anymore, because we don't really know where we came from. And nor have we even set foot in the foundations of it.
It's really fascinating that you say that, because I encountered a term that I had not really thought about in the years we lived in Canada. And one of the things that they pride themselves in there is that Canada, they say, is a mosaic. You know what a mosaic is, all of those little pieces of colored tile and whatever put together to make a bigger picture. Well, America I remember growing up hearing that America is a melting pot.
Mm-hmm.
And the ideal was that even with immigration,
Right.
you entered and you melted down and you brought what you brought, but it kind of molded into the American culture, if you will.
Yeah.
And it was a oneness that came out of that in a melting pot. I think today what we're seeing is not even, it doesn't even feel like a mosaic that is arranged artfully.
Right.
It's more just like a chaotic pile of what not. Who knows what it is?
Yeah. I'm just, what I don't understand, well, I do understand in a certain way that why do people flock into America, and do they really want to be part of America? Is America that great to them that they want to be part of it? And if it is, why don't they change to what America believes? Rather than that, people come in and they try to change that. And we know that. We know that's happened from people that come in from some of these countries. They try to change the laws and everything of what America was. And so when I look at that, I see the devil having a big hand in this. He's trying to destroy the freedoms that we have and what America really stood for. I remember the times when there was Bible and, you'd have your opening prayer school. I remember those days. One of the first things you do is the Lord's Prayer was said. And that was never a challenge. All at once it was challenged. You couldn't do it. And that's where the erosion started. And that's where violence started. And I know that there's some people who would argue that, but if you take a real honest look, that's exactly the way it is. And not only that, if you understand any Christian principles at all, if you erode those principles away, you will have other standards.
If the foundations are destroyed, yes.
It's just the way it is. And people can argue that as long as they want to, but that's what history repeats and history says and confirms over and over and over. And that's even in a personal life, it's that way. So, where does that bring us today?
Well, and that is something that I think as church leaders and as Christians in general, the question comes up: how do we respond to the things that we see in the politics of our nation? How do we walk as children of light, as the Scripture says, a crooked in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation? And it feels like if there was ever a time that is true, it's now. But how do we walk in that way? And I think these are some things that play into our daily lives, but specifically when we continue to talk about business, because that's been a big issue for people as they look at what are the opportunities. Does the American dream still exist? Is there, because that's been the land of opportunity.
Right.
Opportunities that were based on law and order, fairness,
right.
The idea that in this place, your word is your word. Yeah. You have a generalized understanding of what is right and wrong.
Right.
And it's based on something outside of ourselves. But today that doesn't seem to be the case. It's sort of what I feel, what I think. Probably if there's ever a time that we need to look at the words of Proverbs 3:5-7, and these are words that you have used often. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. And probably, I would say today is a day to do that, maybe more so than at other times. Not more so, but as much as we ever did.
Well, you need that. You just in all decisions, you need that guidance. But part of the problem, too, is that America used to believe, and people in America as a whole believe, that there was a God. Well, has been diminishing, and there's not near as many people that believe that there is a God. Well, if you don't believe that there is a God, then you're your own power. You're your own, and there's nothing else to rely on. And people become complete self-absorbed idiots. That's
when you've got nothing bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
And if we really stop and think about it, we're quite small. We're not as strong as we think we are. We're not as bright as we think we are.
No.
And we don't know as much as we think we know. And so when you're relying on yourself to be the authority.
Yeah. And to think that if you know, there's the thing that I see that atheists often, they're so anti-God. Why would you be anti-God? If you don't believe there's a God, laugh about it. Don't have to enforce your thing. That tells me that they do believe there is a God, and they just don't like him, all right? Because if you're truly convinced that there is no God, why even have an argument? Why? It's like me saying that there's $1 million laying on this table right here, right there it is. And I'm trying to tell you, don't you dare take that. You don't take that. You don't take that. I'm not even going to talk about you not taking that if there's nothing there. So if I don't believe that there is no, if I would believe there is no God, I wouldn't even argue it. There's nothing there.
If you're there telling me that and there's nothing laying there, I'm going to probably just after a bit walk away from the table and not even try to talk to you.
Absolutely.
But you're right. It seems
it's
like
the way it is.
It seems like there are a lot of people who want to rebel against the idea of God, continue to come back and try to tell you that there's nothing on the table.
Why do that if there's nothing on the table? So that tells you the very thing that they argue and stand against in their cause tells you that they do believe in God. They're just against him. But the more we have that influx in America, that anti-Christ, anti-God spirit, you're going to see the violence and rebellion and all that, and it's just basically out of hand what's been happening in the last. I look back. The first time I saw this type of corruption, that is very obvious corruption, was when President Clinton came in. There we know some things that happened that all at once it was obvious. There is a problem here, and it's being covered up. And problem here, covering up, because people started disappearing. I've never recalled that before. Now, somebody might be watching, say, "Oh yeah, you don't remember back further." Well, that's where I started seeing it, and from that point on, the personal assassinations that they had. Before there were disagreements, but there was not personal assassinations.
People weren't just disappearing or somehow having these undescribed.
No, but even just taking someone completely apart, you didn't have that. You had a argument. You could argue, and you'd argue back and forth. But there was a certain rule of that they all maintained in their heart of respect and honor. But from that point on, it's just been changed, and now the mess we're in right now is absolutely pathetic. I mean, this is pathetic. What's going on right now, and the way the news media is covering up for everything, and they're bought. They're just covering up everything. I would say like this: do you really want to be that unintelligent to not recognize certain problems and just continue to cover up? I mean, the very idea that on the debate, whatever that was, that debate that that was just obvious, I guess that's what it was. I don't know for sure. But then at the end of all that, and here comes Nancy Pelosi and says that she thinks Trump should quit the race because he has dementia. Have you ever heard anything like so? There is bias like crazy, all right? The one does not have the one that's very obvious that has some problems, all right? It's very obvious. You don't hear anything about, but the one that is actually innocent in that is the one that gets blamed. So I'm just saying there is this kind of bias that's going on in government right now that is completely wild. It's completely out of hand.
It seems like, when we talk about, 248 years ago, Declaration of Independence, you had strong disagreements.
Yeah.
But you also had an ability to observe and speak truth.
Yeah.
Today, it feels like truth has fallen in the streets.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of those things, but what can a Christian do? And tonight, I'd like to look at that. What can we do in business and in our personal lives? And business impacts so much. I mean, people need work. People provide work. We solve problems through business. Christians in the workplace and Christian businessmen have a huge impact on culture. Yeah. And I think one of the things that brings people in the past was the opportunities to do business.
Right.
and to create an income stream that would allow a person to achieve things. But as we look at this, trusting in the Lord, not leaning on our own understanding, but what are some of the motivations that a person would have for business? What motivates business?
What motivates someone to be a preacher? That's a big question I have myself, because I've never benefited from it. Nothing. If anything, it's been pretty destructive. Where in business, at least, it wasn't. In business, it was something that I would not be scrutinized every move I make or every word I say. But as a minister, as a preacher, you just never get away from that limelight. Somebody can say something mean about a business somewhere. It pretty much is like, it's gone.
Yeah.
You don't really...
It might hang around a few days, but then it's gone.
But when it's about a preacher or a minister, then it's very personal. And it doesn't go away. It makes big gossip and strong opinions. And so what motivates that? And for me was, I think, the balance between being in the limelight of being, a pastor, that's hard. It's very hard. It's very difficult. You get ridiculed all the time. Even probably today, once I'm done talking, there's probably somebody disgusted and just like that. But when you talk business, you don't hear that, unless it's jealous people, but they normally don't listen to things, like this. But even then, it's different. And I found that a lot of people that have the business minds are people that are much more reasonable, because they have to work and they have to comply and they have to get along with their fellow people. As an employer, they have to get along with the people they employ. As employees, they got to get along with fellow employees. Church, not so. Don't have to do that, and makes it more difficult that way. But I think for me, it's really refreshing. Business is very refreshing. You're not dealing with the personal problems. And my question, I guess I would turn back then is, but what in the world motivated me to even be a preacher? And I'll be honest with you, I do not know. I really do not know. There is really, the only thing I can say is my love for God and people, but it's not that there is an overwhelming love that I sense in my heart, that I just feel so much love. It's not that, but it's the act of when I see somebody in trouble that has problems, I want to reach out to help them. And through pastor or spiritual things, you can do that. Business is not focused that way. And so that's probably why my motivation is, but it'll cost you everything to be a pastor, unless you just want to be passive and just say what everyone wants you to say, but then you won't help people either.
Well, and I don't think that actually lives up to the calling either. If you were to ask me what motivated me to be a pastor, I would say I don't know that I had much choice in that matter. It was a call of God and to follow Him. I mean, that's the motivation, is because I want to obey Him. I want to serve Him, and I think then there has been motivation along the way where the love of God shed abroad in my heart had that compassion for people, even though
there are segments of that. Yeah, there are segments of that. But then there's also larger segments that would be the other way, in my experience.
Well, I know there was a time when I felt like the will of God was so painful, and it was like a catch-22. I was like, if I walk away from it, then I'm without God.
Well, you're right.
If I stay in it, this hurts like crazy.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Yeah, it is like that. But then you ask, what motivates business? You don't have it that way.
You don't have it that way.
No, you don't have it that way. Yeah, I was also called. I know I was called. But the other side, if I would walk away from my calling, or would have walked away from my calling, like many people have, they just can't take it. It's too much weight. They can't. They just can't endure. You think they're not going to go to heaven for it? It's not necessarily a salvation issue, I don't believe. So there are some options, and to me, it's a it's a really difficult thing for me to understand at times what really kept me going through the many times that I should have just quit and walked away and yeah.
Well, it reminds me of a message you preached recently where you talked about God's grace
That's
being
probably what it
present
was.
and sufficient right in the time of need.
That's all I can say. That's what it was. It wasn't anything I did, but somehow the endurance of it all and I'm not just saying from moment to moment, but I'm talking from.
Hey, there are some times though. There really are. There are those seasons where it's like I need that grace for the next minute because I'm done.
Yeah. But then you can't feel grace. If you feel it, it ain't grace.
You see it later.
You do when you look back.
Yeah. Well, Proverbs 5:21 says this: "The ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he ponders all his paths." That's a comforting thought. The ways of man. And I look at your life, and I don't see nearly everything. I see more results today and hear the stories. But so you felt the calling of God, obviously, to be a minister, but you also had you must have had a distinct motivation beyond just, hey, this feels better than ministry. You were motivated to build and to work in business. There was something that motivated you.
Yeah. Well, okay, so the early years, our church was very young, of course. It just started, and people did not really have that much money. And so there were no options, basically. I needed to be their leader. I was the leader up until then. Then I had a lot of influence on the people that formed, but it's like David said. The people that David had around him were not necessarily of great high quality.
Yeah, well, they were the discontented. There was 3 Ds. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember exactly what they were.
Yeah, and that's very much where God builds His
debtors,
church. Yeah, that's where God builds the church, and I wanted to do that. It was very much on my heart. The other thing too that you have to remember is that when God touches you with a calling, it's not that you now have to, but there is with that touch through that time. With that, God gives you a desire to follow that. And it's not that I just simply didn't want to and He dragged me right into it. No, there was a willingness that came with that. But as time goes on and difficulties are experienced, that starts diminishing. And you can really be careful with that, because all at once there's so many big things that are negative for you that you try to weigh this out. And that's why what is the average pastor in America? Only lasts 5 years? Or is it less than that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's pretty small.
Well, it is. It's not a very, very long time, and it's because, it's not. You're dealing with people's personalities and so forth. But it's a hard thing. But coming back to the motivation for business then is, well, I need to make a living somehow. I need to have food on the table, and I can go out and just have a regular job, but it would never afford me to take off and do the Lord's work in certain demands that I would have to face, and like go away for meetings. My income would stop. And so there were motivations to do something that can continue even if I'm not on the scene. And that's kind of how it was. Plus also my children. I wanted something for my children. That was very much a foundational thing, that I worked in an environment that wasn't so good. My first year of marriage, and it had an effect on me that was not good, that I felt I would, if I could ever have the opportunity to start something that, God could bless in a way that I could employ people, I would want to have certain things in that place that it would at least be a good work environment for Christian people. And that was a very big motivation. And the Christian people, especially my family, were in that picture. And that motivated me for those things.
Well, and I think you're talking here, and it illustrates it illustrates something that we see in Proverbs 4:26, where we read that we need to ponder the path of your feet and let all your ways be established. And in that moment, you were looking at and pondering, really, the path of your feet.
Yeah,
You're
very
seeing
much
this
so.
does not lead where I want it to go. What is God doing in this? And in some ways, business and pursuing that, there was a motivation to establish your ways and in your paths.
I remember when I basically broke these verses to the church years ago, the one Sunday where I had just a little segment of, teaching or something like in an opening, I just said, ponder the paths of your feet. And this was a very strong word to me, that which way are they pointed? Where will you be in 10 years from now if you continue to walk that way? And that's in business or whatever. But I took it as a positive, not necessarily a warning, but direct your feet where you want to end up. Don't wander out in the wilderness and just hope you get there. There's a lot of people that are just not concerned about their future. They're not concerned about being taken care of when they get older. And they live high on the hog, if you can say it that way. They get rid of their money, just do this and do that, and just not spend it wisely. And I don't know that you have to be that way all through life, but in those early foundational times in a person's life, that definitely needs to be part of it. To be careful and start planning for your future. And if you're married, what if the husband would pass before the wife does? Is there something there to support her? And if you love your wife, then those are things that you have to look forward in establishing. And that's where the ponder the path of my feet. Where will this take my family? Where will this take me? Where will I end up? Am I headed in the right direction? I don't know, but ponder it. All right? Think about it. Are you making right strides? Are you making correct decisions? Is it reflective of where you're going to be? Or are you just out kicking around because you got to do something? That's one way that people get themselves in trouble. But you have to be wise. We have to be wise and pondering the path of our feet. Don't wake up to a place where you don't know how in the world you got there. You got there because you walked there.
Right. And that's important.
It is. It is. Some people just don't think that way. They just think it just life happens. Well, no, it doesn't. It's, and I have people, I'll just say this, I have people that sometimes, speak words of envy about me, and, they wish they'd be where I'm at, things of this nature, or why can't I be where were you walking? Follow the path that I walked and see what all I did, then you would understand. You always want God's blessing on that too, but you have to ponder the path of your feet. And I would much rather ponder the path of my feet going forward than coming to a dead end stop later on in my older years and wondering, where in the world did I come from? How did I end up here? Well, it's simply because you did not ponder the path of your feet. Now, there's unfortunate things that can happen. I do understand that. And to some people, like accidents and things of that nature, that definitely. But even then, we need to be careful of our walk and have them ordered and walk in the best things that we know. And have confidence in our walking.
Even if you're taking a hike somewhere, you want to know where the trail goes. You can step into holes. You can find out that it's been washed out.
Yeah.
James 1, verse 5 says this, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given him. And I think when it comes to these things, when we talk about pondering the path of our feet, but how do I even evaluate that? And there's a lot of people that say, well, how do I know if God is in this or not? When you're looking at business decisions, people often divorce that from the leading of the Lord. It's sort of like, it's a great opportunity, let's walk through it, let's just do it. Are there things along the way where you felt the distinct leading of God, you prayed for wisdom, and God took you in a right path, or how would you?
You're saying
those?
business-wise.
Business-wise.
Yeah, I would say that way. But let me say that I've also am aware that without faith, it's impossible to please God. So God is only pleased if we walk by faith. So a lot of those things were done in faith.
Right.
And not necessarily that God just showed me, but he did tell me some things when my life was in devastation in those early years where I had no money, I had nothing, I was dust poor, that he showed me those verses out of Joel. I will restore the years of the cankerworm and palmer worm. Okay, so he showed me that, and I took that as a promise. I walk by the promises of God. That I'm very, very, very literal with that. If God gives me a promise, if a promise gets my attention, it's not for my benefit, but it's a promise that God gave. Then that is telling me, believe that and receive that. You walk and act upon that. And I truly believe that. My life all the way through, from way back, 68 years, but that was when I was really young. But when I came to a place of knowledge and understanding of Scripture, where this thing really got a hold of me, was where I saw that, my life of faith, the life of faith that I have in God will take me where he directs my path. And where he directs my path is where he causes my eyes to see. Mm-hmm. And when my eyes see that, I order my feet accordingly. And that's pretty much a principle that I've followed all through my life, that what I see in my eyes, where God has turned my head, my feet will go there. There's times when it's different, but you turn your feet. That's very much the same principle that God spoke to Abraham when Abraham and Lot had issues, and Lot made a decision. He said, this is where I will go, because he looked at the fields and he looked at the flocks and he said, this is the best of the best. I will go there. But what Lot did not know, that when he went there, he basically closed the door on all other regions. But because Abraham did not make a choice, he never chose where to go. He allowed God to do that. So he just, so he took the best. I'll just take the rest, all right? But then God said, it's all yours, including that. Everything is yours, but you have to walk it. And so I've learned that you have to walk in the promises of God. You have to walk them. You have to be active in it. You can't just say, well, God, you showed me. God, you showed me. Well, keep saying that. But you have to be active in walking in those directions. I believe one of those ways of being active is if there is a prophetic word that someone would give to you, I always wondered, well, how do I look at this? Because somebody gave me a word and says, I believe the Lord is telling me this to tell you, or there's just something on my heart I want to share with you. And it was, I saw very quickly that was a promise. Most of the promises I received are just out of the Word, or I get it as a nugget from something, whether it's something I read, it's a nugget and it has a hold of me. But what Mary did when the impossible happened to her, I mean, she was told, you're going to have a baby and there's no man involved. And it's like, Mary could have questioned every last thing. And the picture to Mary is much bigger than what most people understand because of her background as an Essene. But what happens here is it says that Mary pondered it in her heart. She just pondered it. All right? That's it. She didn't proclaim it now, and she didn't go all over it and tell everyone else about it. She just pondered it in her heart and said, be it according to your word. That's how I respond to that. And I've seen many, many marvelous, mighty, big, powerful things happen.
And that's such a key, because I've heard people that have come to me and they said, this person came and they prophesied in my life about the things that I'm going to be doing and everything.
Big things.
Big things.
Yep.
And immediately, suitcases full of money and all of this stuff. And now we're trying to make it happen and wondering where this is and always looking. But I think that key of saying, you know what, if it's your word, Lord, be it to me according to your word, and I'm going to keep walking.
Yep, that's exactly
good.
right. That's important. And I get tired of these prophetic words that come from people always, God will use you greatly. Really, why isn't it once in a while where God would say that I will use you in a little thing over here? Huh? In my understanding, is many little things is how God builds his great kingdom. Not necessarily just big old great things, but many little things. He builds this great kingdom. And that's how I understand it. When someone says, oh, there's something, I see something very big, God will use you, you'll be all right. Be it according to your word, Lord. I'll receive it. I'll just ponder it in my heart. I'm not going to make it work. You will have to do it if it was you.
And walking by faith. And Abraham picks up and goes that way, and he walks and begins to walk the length and breadth of the land. Proverbs 2, 6-9 says this, the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield for those who walk uprightly. He guards the path of justice and preserves the way of his saints. And then you will understand righteousness and justice, equity, and every good path. Now, when you look at those things, there's a lot in that when he's talking about God doing this. So when we ask for wisdom, God gives it liberally. From his mouth comes all these things. We always have a place to go, whether it's in church, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in business. God, I believe, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would believe that God is very interested in the business choices that people make.
Well, it belongs to him. You know, that to me is very important, that he is the owner of it all. It's not me. I have no possession. All I can take with me is one pair of clothes. That's it. What a person wears in his coffin is basically what they take with them. And so there's really nothing. So that there is a big storage place somewhere in heaven that God can give. And that's the one that's worth working for and having. However, that can be in all sense of our labors. If you do it as unto the Lord, if you glorify him in it, you do everything heartily as unto the Lord. Well, there you're doing it unto him. You'll be rewarded for that, even in heaven. You might get reward even here, but in heaven you will as well. And so to me, that's a double thing. That's a tremendous double treasure. So let's work for that. Let's when I say work for, not work for grace, not work to get saved. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking salvation. But we need to maintain good works for necessary uses, that the gospel be not blamed. And that's important. So there are good things, and carry good attitudes, and do good deeds to people, and all those are very good things to do and maintain.
So and you've done this over the years. You've been in business how many years?
Oh, goodness. Well, I bought my first piece of heavy equipment when I was 18 years old. And I was back in the Jimmy Carter days. My dad signed a note, and I bought it for a backhoe for $14,000. Yeah, $14,000. And it was all a note, and I had saved up some money, from catching chickens. And not a whole lot, but enough that I could, my dad co-signed for me. And that's how it started. And
so 18, and 18, you're 68 now.
I'm 68,
so, 50 years of business.
Yeah.
So how does a person stay true to their values, even when the business climate allows for, or maybe even expects, compromise and dishonesty? You've lived through a lot of different climates. Today it seems like truth is falling in the streets. It's just whatever makes it work. But how can you stay true to your values even in a climate like this?
Well, okay, so I understand. All right, let's exemplify that. So I used to have a business where I would have to cheat on keeping my logs meaning log books, and I have to carry overweight loads into other states. I'd run through the night when the scale houses were closed, because it's the only way to go. You just worked everything you could, and to make ends meet. It was tough. I didn't have my own ICC rights. And so as a result of that, somebody else always I leased it onto some other company, which they got between 8 and 10%. Well, that's basically your profit. Okay. And so what they want you to do is go out there and take the heavy loads and try to make it that way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And but I finally saw that, you know what, if I want God's blessing on my life, and I depend on God's blessing because I'm a Christian, I don't have the strategies. I don't have the smarts. I don't have all of that it would take typically. And I will have to rely totally on God's blessing to make things happen for me, to make it successful. And when I cannot be honest, I can't, it's going to cut off his blessing. Mm-hmm. So I knew I had to make a choice. And so I changed my occupation. And that was a very difficult time because I saw no way possible to undo what I was doing. There was no way possible. The money that I owed at that point, it was a complete miracle what happened. God saw that I'm making a step in faith, and he most definitely honored it, even down to within hours of things that he brought to pass. One of them was I had a payment that was due on a trailer. And when I said I can't go on anymore, I will just have to set it down. There was something wrong with the truck. I had 3 trucks at that time. There was something wrong with the truck, and there was something wrong with the trailer. And I didn't have any money to fix that trailer. And I thought, and then one morning when I was praying, God spoke to my heart and said, fix the trailer. I'm sending a buyer. And to me, it was like, I'm not used to this kind of conversation with God. God, I know that there's people that walk like this before you, but I've really not experienced it that way so much. But I felt I heard from God. But with that also came the idea is that you have to walk by faith now. You know, you have to, if you believe me,
step of faith,
if you believe me, you will act according. And so I did. I went out to a local business, and I had no money. That was before credit cards. And I told them that I need some lights to put in the back, and it was not a big amount of money. Wondered if there's any way I could charge this. I didn't have an account with him, and pay for it later, within a week or two or whatever they allow, and then I'll come back and pay for it. And they said, yeah, they'll let me do that. It was a distant neighbor, all right? And so I did that, and I went home, and it was like, and I put the lights on and everything, put everything in place. And it was, I'm thinking it was 2.5 hours later after I did that. And the trailer was sitting there for a long time. This is a semi-trailer. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have money to fix it. I didn't know what to do. So I did that. And I think it was 2.5 hours later, somebody called on the phone and said, is that trailer for sale that you have out there, sitting there by the road? And I said, yeah, it is. I said, how much you want for it? And I gave him the price that I would want for it. And he, no, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. 2.5 hours later, after I fixed the light, I had a check in my hand. That's how it was for the entire amount for the trailer.
Wow.
And that was a tremendous faith lesson for me.
And that was coming on the heels of making the decision that I can no longer operate outside of the values of Christ and truth. Yeah.
Right. And God knew my heart. God knew that the ministry and calling he has for me, that I can't be doing that. And so he honored that, and he found the way out for me. Now, some people will sit back and admire business and everything and say, everything is always fallen in line for you and all that. You have no idea what all I have endured down through the years, some very, very difficult times at times. And And so what you see now is basically just making right decisions for years. Yeah, and that's important. That to me is important. Make right decisions. And also ask God for wisdom. When you mentioned that, I thought, well, what does that look like? Well, wisdom often comes from experience, right? It does. God allows you to go through sometimes some things, and that adds experience to your life. It's a thing of virtue.
So expect God to allow some circumstances when you ask for wisdom.
I think that's what happened to me. That is how He taught me. He taught me in that school, but then He gave me sound thinking as well. But not only that God now maneuvered my mind or manipulated my mind, but He put values in my mind that you need to pursue this way. Go this way. These are the values I want you to uphold. And a lot of these were Christian values that I felt in my heart. He points you to a Christian value. Now you follow that value. Well, now there's things that fall in place when you do that. It's not that I'm so good at it. It's not that. It's He has taught me as I went, and showed me places and helped me out of places many times by trusting in Him. It's many people don't really trust their steps. And I would really like to tell them it's more important to trust their God than their steps. Really?
That's very good.
Many people have a problem with that. They have more confidence in their steps than they do trusting their God. My thing is I trust God. And when I trust Him, it opens that door to where He leads me. He guides me. He shows me. He gives me understanding. It's very important. I really wish I could impact that on people's lives, that you have to go with that. You can't, if your confidence is greater in your feet than it is in His, that's a problem. Then you'll struggle, and you'll struggle for a long time. But there is a time when you need to leap out. Now, coming back to, I don't know, we're over already.
Yeah, we're over time.
But I would have liked to speak about the dishonest thing. I would have liked to speak a little bit about
Well, we'll have to come back to that.
Yeah.
As we wrap this up right now, and I know this is going to be tough, but I'm going to imagine that I was going to ask you this question, but I think you kind of answered it. I was going to ask you, are you optimistic about the United States business climate in 2024? But I think your answer of don't trust your feet, trust your God.
Yeah.
Don't even trust the climate, trust God in what He's doing.
Yeah. We're in a different kingdom.
Right.
We don't belong in this kingdom of the world. And so the things that happen to us happen in an unusual way, and we can trust our God for it. Meaning also that God will not just let you go out and do some dumb things. That's not our God. He gives wisdom. He gives understanding to the things He wants you to walk in. That's how it works.
Amen. Well, that's a good place to end our program today, and we just want to wish you all a very happy 4th of July, Independence Day.
And this is live, by the way.
Yes, this is live.
4th of July.
This has not been pre-recorded.
No,
this is live. So thank you all for joining us. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening.